The Failure Hypothesis is a Maledro Digital production. If you're interested in making business content with interest or want to tell your story in a future episode, you can contact us at info@maledrodigital.com.
Hi, my name is Vivian Chan, and you're listening to The Failure Hypothesis. Over the course of this podcast series, I'm going to be talking to some of the most interesting leaders from all around the world, from Brazil to the UK, from India to America, all about failure. We'll be testing the simple hypothesis that radical honesty about failure is the secret to success. But is it really that simple? Sometimes, is it better to just keep moving forward? Why can't we just think like a rocket scientist when it comes to failure? To help us find out the answer to these questions and more, we've assembled a dream team of guests that includes the chief scientist of a global tech company, the president of a major record label, a private equity titan, and a Webby Award-winning podcaster. We didn't think it was fair to ask our guests to bare their soul and not for me to do the same. So today, I'm putting myself in the hot seat first. Asking the questions today is James Webster, one of the producers of the show and co-founder of Maledro Digital, an agency that specializes in digital branding and content. I know that James is an ex-lawyer, so James, I hope you'll go easy on me today.
I promise I'll try my best, but this is intense things we're going to be talking about, so I can't promise it'll be easy, but that's the whole reason we're doing this.
Bring it on.
I will do. Well, it's an honor to be playing the part of Vivian Chan today. It's a role, obviously, you're going to be playing over the weeks and months to come. So hopefully I live up to the future example that you set.
No, I'm very honored.
Well, the first thing we're going to be doing in the show, and the first thing we're going to be doing with you, is to talk a bit about you and give you your intro. And the first thing I would say about you is you've got a Wikipedia entry to die for. Let's just tick off some of the things on that. A PhD in biochemistry from the University of Cambridge, a serial entrepreneur founding Silicon Fen Concept,
As well as Sparrow, a company that makes science accessible by transforming complex research into bite-sized summaries written in everyday language, of which you are currently the CEO.
You've been named one of the top 5 women in the top 100 Asian stars in UK tech. You've been named in Management Today's 35 Women Under 35. You've been selected as a semi-finalist for the Duke of York New Entrepreneur of the Year. You've been selected by MIT Technology Review as one of its 35 innovators under 35. You've been invited to address EU ministers about the importance of open data for innovation. You've sat on the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sports Economic Advisory Group. You would ask, what the hell do you know about failure? As that shows, your accolades are many. Obviously, the greatest accolade of your career is the Failure Hypothesis host. But
Of course.
we're going to hear a bit more about the story behind that success, because you're going to share with us today some times when things did not go to plan. So let's put you under the microscope. Let's talk about a challenging time in your career, which is the contrast to that roll call of excellence, which is always the case, obviously. So tell us your failure story.
Absolutely. Well, to start off with, just having someone read out the Wikipedia list is actually, I think it's the first time someone's ever done that for me. So I'm feeling quite honored. But you're right. I think that's a nice little summary of what success looks like. But with every single success, there's probably about 5 to 10 more failures to get to each bullet point. So the highs and the lows have been very much quite intense in the career as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So I think if you were to start thinking about it from, I think what school, and I think Reid Hoffman has said this as well, school really prepares you for academic education, but you really only start to live life and learn about life once you've graduated.
Yes.
So whether or not you graduate from high school, whether or not you graduate from university or not, it doesn't matter. It's when do you choose to also be open to what life is going to teach you with the life lessons.
Yeah.
And life lessons is all about failure.
Yes.
I feel like the only constant is failure to success.
Yeah.
If you don't go through all of the really sad times, the heartbreaking moments where you actually cry yourself to sleep and you don't really know why you're still doing it, then you don't actually understand what that bittersweet success actually feels like.
And one of the reasons that we're doing this, and I know one of the reasons we're both so passionate about this is what you just said about crying yourself to sleep, is that we hopefully live in a world now where people can admit that and share that with other people and learn from that, because that is actually a big change. You know, not so long ago you'd never admit that, and I think that's really powerful. So what is the story you're going to share today that maybe did make you cry yourself to sleep, or you know, doubt yourself, or even if you were to look at that Wikipedia list and go, that means nothing because this thing's happened today and that overrides any of this? What's that story that you're going to share with us today?
Well, I think one of the first ones I'm going to share about is the autoimmune condition.
Oh wow, okay.
Because there was a lot of sacrifices that was made to get to those bullet points. So as an entrepreneur, a lot of people don't really share that story. And you're right in pointing out that crying to sleep should be very much shared.
Yeah.
And I think maybe as a person, as a founder, I'm very much quite open to sharing my emotions, maybe more so than other entrepreneurs. But I also found that it was the entrepreneur peer network that actually was the most life-saving for me as an entrepreneur. And I won't go through all of them, but for example, I know that other people had to also go through personal health sacrifices in order to achieve the successes that they had in their business as well. So my autoimmune, if anything, is actually just a sliver of what other people have gone through, which I don't know if they share. So the autoimmune, I think why I wanted to start with that was, I think probably genetically, I always was prone to the autoimmune condition, but because you have genetics, but you also have life experiences that trigger certain conditions. And I think, and I do know, because the doctors have told me, that the first couple of years of starting up the business, I was so passionate about it. I was so like, this is my life. I met a lot of great friends and entrepreneurs who are all passionate about building their own businesses. This I felt was a great opportunity, and also a luxury that I really shouldn't be given up the opportunity when I was first selected to kind of go, hang on a second, you know, we think you're a good entrepreneur.
Because you started as a scientist, didn't you?
Yes. Well, actually, that's very interesting. Yes. I did start, I was trained as a scientist, and I'd studied in biotechnology in Australia. And then I had a brief year in life science investing, which was very good because that actually got me thinking about the applications and investments of scientific research. But then I was very fortunate enough to get scholarships to both Oxford and Cambridge. And for this particular PhD, I chose Cambridge to do a structural biology biochemistry degree. So I packed my bags really young, came over. The first time I really explored the UK and Europe, besides like a 2-week holiday or something like that.
Well, it's a long way to go, isn't it?
Exactly. So you try to do as much of Europe all in 2 weeks, but you don't really know what it means to live there all by yourself, without any family, without any friends. I was just a young girl, full of dreams, thinking I'm going to seize the opportunity of being a better scientist.
And coming to Oxbridge is a pretty intimidating. It's not just arriving on a nice holiday, is it? It's pretty much being thrown in the academic deep end as well.
Yeah, but I actually loved. Yeah. I think I really enjoyed my Cambridge days because it was the perfect ecosystem.
Yeah.
for any passionate young individuals who is, really ready to dream big. And I chose the role of scientist, or I rather chose to study in biotechnology or in a PhD in science, because it was always kind of back to some of my life thesis, which is, number one, I want to make an impact in the world. And so I thought that being a scientist was the way to do that.
Yeah.
And number two, I also want to forever be learning. Yeah. So I never wanted to be in a place where I'm like, oh, I'm doing the same thing over and over, or I'm not actively using my analytical problem-solving skills. I wanted to be challenged. And I felt like being thrown into Cambridge was perfect for that, because you're right. Yeah, the scenery was beautiful, right? Yeah. And the culture and the history is absolutely phenomenal. But then the people that you get thrown into is like, oh, it's not like a normal chit chat about, sitcoms. It's like, what do you think about the political agenda right now?
Well, it sounds like you loved a good hypothesis from an early age. So it seems like you on a track to do this from a young age. So how does so that sounds a really exciting journey. So with that autoimmune condition, and obviously if you're happy to share the details of that, that would be great. Is that sort of like not affecting you at university? That's something that comes later? Correct. Or was that, so that's it's actually something that happens later, and it's like probably less expected, because like a lot with health conditions like that, you think maybe that presents earlier and it's a shock, to happen later in life. So how does that, so what's the stage at which that first is diagnosed, or you're happy at university, all these things, these accolades and stimulating conversations, and that's, I think a lot of people who do really well academically, you're on a track, you feel like destiny is on your side, you're at Cambridge University, all this stuff, and then things like that, it's like that very overused quote of Mike Tyson's, which is, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Was this a bit of a punch in the face? And sort of talk about how that punch in the face happened.
Yeah, I like how you're describing it as a punch in the face, because I think I've been very, very fortunate through my upbringing, and also being able to have given the opportunity to expand my academic career. Everything was great. I really enjoyed it. Had some of the best times in Cambridge. Met some of the most lifelong, friends there. I was also fortunate at that point to be part of like the Cambridge University Technology Enterprise Club. So I met a lot of entrepreneur-minded friends as well. But my autoimmune was not there. So it was very obvious that once I started, it was not like, going into a new environment, for example, moving from Australia to United Kingdom. It wasn't that triggered it.
It wasn't an exciting new challenge. It was an unwelcome, it was an imposter into
your exactly. So it wasn't life. Like, the UK climate or anything like that. And I still, I finished my PhD, graduated, all great. Then I got selected as well as one of the top 30 graduates in the country to try to be an entrepreneur. And then that
so there wasn't any consideration of continue with science, or was it when someone gives you the opportunity, no, that is what I want to do?
Yeah, I think it was like, I always thrive to find something that no one else has done. So that was also
a very important quality in an entrepreneur. So that's
but I didn't know back then as well. And actually, one of my very early mentors, Sherry Kutu, she sits on, she's been involved with like LinkedIn, and also sits on the board, I think, the London Stock Exchange on point. She pointed out to me when I was at Cambridge, before I knew I was an entrepreneur, she said, "You're going to be an entrepreneur." And I was like, oh, okay.
What did you say? What specifically she'd seen in you that made her say that?
I don't know. I think, to be fair, it was one of those pivotal moments.
Yeah.
So I was somehow ended up being the president of this Cambridge University Technology and Enterprise Club.
That just happened,
It just happened.
Just woke up one day. And,
it was like, it was a biochemistry friend who realized that I had some investing background with the venture capital, and then so like, why not? This is back in Australia. So in between the undergrad and coming over to a PhD, I was life science in a venture capital firm, especially in the life science investing perspective. And then so they thought that was interesting, asked me to join. Next thing you know, they asked me to run for president. I got picked, and then the rest was history. So through that, I met a lot of amazing Cambridge angels and also mentors like Sherry Kutu and David Cleveley, Matthew Cleveley, all these great people. Who I think really put the pillars of me being an entrepreneur or identifying me as an entrepreneur before I even knew that those qualities meant that I would be best put in an entrepreneurship.
Because that raw talent, I mean, you'll know this as a boss yourself, it's like, that's not enough. It needs someone to spot that and give you the opportunity. And obviously being that amazingly prestigious university setting that, you know, and then that career that you had afterwards gives you that advantage. So I think that's a really important lesson that every entrepreneur is a very lonely road. You have to do it all yourself, but that's why it's so important to remember that you still need those other people. And I think, and as an entrepreneur myself, I know that when you think you can do it all alone is normally when you go wrong.
Yes.
You know, the buck stops with you, but it doesn't mean you have to do it all alone. And I think that's when you have those incredible people. I've been lucky to have those as well. None of them sit on the board of LinkedIn, but they're also, so how does sorry, I'll let you continue with the story about how we get to that punch in the face.
Yeah, so I think what you pointed out was really, really true. And for anyone who's even thinking about being an entrepreneur, I think to keep you sane, you need mentors, really good mentors. And you're going to have various different mentors throughout your life, but also be open to accepting them with open arms. And then the second one I would say is the peers of the entrepreneurship. So actual your peer-to-peer entrepreneur network.
Yeah.
With those two, those are the ones that kept me sane. But, well, I would say in quotation sane, because as an entrepreneur, you're so passionate, you are very curious, or maybe I am very much curious because of a scientist in me has been like, okay, so why is this? Why is that? And that actually ended up going through a whole bunch of questions I had about the world, and also questions about my life thesis about where best to make an impact. Right. Okay. Well, actually, outside of just being a PhD, there is so much more of science that potentially I can communicate to the world. And I realize that science communication is one of those areas that I can really make an impact, because people don't really think about science communication. But if you think about David Attenborough, or you think about Brian Cox, actually, what are they doing? Or the Science Museum, right?
Well,
what they're doing is communicating
and
science to the world.
That's what's so incredible about what you're doing, because I think that it's a simple thing that applies across all disciplines, which is some people like to make things sound more complicated to make themselves sound more intelligent. The real great people, like David Attenborough, you know, they make it seem simple, so it doesn't seem sciencey, so it doesn't seem technical.
Correct.
That is the gift. It's when you start receiving that information, and I know that's core to what you're doing. It's like making it accessible rather than remote and inaccessible. That is real skill. And I think that some people think if they make it sound really simple, that makes them sound less of an expert. David Attenborough is the perfect example of that.
Yeah. He definitely, I think it's harder to simplify things in a concise way and it's way easier for me to blab on for like 5 sentences about one thing. But we'll come to Sparrow in a little bit, but I think what's really interesting around the network is that despite the network, as an entrepreneur, you're so driven, so interested, the drive of the hunger of, I've been given this opportunity to solve a problem, that you do end up working ridiculous hours, especially the first few years as an entrepreneur. Meant that I was learning, I was loving it. I also could hire people that I enjoyed working with, but we were young and naive. We didn't really know what we were tackling at the same time. It's like,
sometimes it's better not to know the challenge that you're facing, because then maybe you'd never start the journey.
Correct. So, actually, you're right. I think half the time I was very naive, but naivety was such a blessing. But it's like, I was talking about this, talking about that. And one of my very first angel investor, Alistair Mitchell, who is a founder and now is also a partner at EQT Ventures in the US, he was kind of like the first one who believed in me by putting down a check, right? He was literally just said, I like what you're doing. Now I'm in. Now prove to me what you can do. Yeah. And then that was like okay, this is actually no longer a dream. This is going to happen. So then what do I do? And then I realized, what is due diligence? What's the kind of like the the documentations I need to put together, and then I ask my mentors, and then you're like, whoa, okay, I don't know how to do. You don't really know what the journey is, but if you're open to that journey and open to opportunities, that's great. But that drives the hunger and even more. Yeah. So that just meant that I would always be, I'll just check another email. I'll just do another, session planning. And then I didn't know how to switch my brain off. I think that's the main thing. I was very much working on my analytical side and problem solving, and I was feeding off it, loved it, but I didn't really let my body rest, and I didn't know how to mentally switch off from work. Yeah. And to have that sustained for a period of time, like years, that added a cumulative stress level. Yeah. Was really what my body was reacting to.
So just talk us through the timeline roughly of university, then life sciences, and then so just top line, like sort of where are you, which point? So go from at 18, I'm assuming, or around then. Went to Cambridge, or did you?
So I'd have to do my undergrad first.
Oh, okay, so you came as a postgrad. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so
24 I came over. 18
okay, so you came over to the UK.
2008 is all I remember. Okay. 2008 is when I came over, and I was early 20s because I just did my undergrad. That was 4 years with the honours.
And was the life the stint in private equity between the undergrad and the postgrad?
Correct. So there was another venture capital period there, and then I came over.
And after the postgrad is where this again, I guess, which makes perfect sense because you've already sort of dipped your toe in that water anyway. Then this entrepreneurial potential gets spotted, and then after the postgrad, you sort of fully commit to a business career. But as you say, it's the same passion for kind of finding answers or solving problems that drove you in just
a different channel. I felt like I was actually problem solving in a very similar way. Yeah. I do actually believe that scientists can make really good entrepreneurs because we go through the same kind of, what's a hypothesis? What is the data points? And then actually, can we make a conclusion out of this?
Well, I'm a big fan of all of the sort of Shark Tank and Dragon's Den shows, but one I've been watching recently a lot is the Australian one. Oh. And there's a guy on that, I forgot his name, but he always says, I won't invest in businesses that don't have a tech co-founder. So I think that science is, of all the unicorns out there, how many of them don't involve technology and science these days? Yeah. So
with a founder who is very data driven.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think there is this thing like that. That you feel, and I think a lot of people, scientists do make entrepreneurs. Well, of course they do, because it's being data driven, solving problems. But like this is what we're kind of getting at in this podcast. It's just like, but even a scientist from that background, it's hard to think like a rocket scientist. It's because when it comes to your own personal emotions, that can obscure even the technical skills that you might have. Yeah. But I think it's interesting that you feel the need to say, I think a lot of people do, and I've heard it from other science entrepreneurs as well. Oh, we can be. Well, of course. Like, and it's like, it's probably one of the most important or the best backgrounds to have as an entrepreneur in the digital age.
Yeah, so, and when I was first starting out, it wasn't a thing. It wasn't very much a norm, which I do know in the last couple of years, it's completely changed, especially out in the US, right? So it's like, Stanford and all of that has become tech bubbles and startup bubbles, but also in the UK. Yeah. That's definitely, I love the shift that's happened now. But when I first started off, there was 30 entrepreneurs in the first cohort. I was one of 3 women, and of one of 3 PhDs. So I was the only female PhD in that cohort.
In 2008?
So this is 2012. Okay. So after I graduated my PhD.
Horrifyingly recent.
Yeah.
Horrifyingly recent.
Yeah. But in a very good way, a lot's happened in the startup and investment world to really support and pull out a lot of the scientists and the technology graduates or even enthusiasts to really pursue entrepreneurship. But to kind of come back to that, the really punch in the face moment was as an entrepreneur. So because you get punched in the face so many times, and I don't actually remember what the very first punch in the face was, because now in comparison to what I've had to overcome. It
I'm
seems
sure
so
many
minuscule.
boxes, there's so many that you like.
Yeah, I
remembering an
actually
individual
don't.
punch is hard,
Yeah.
unless it was a knockout one.
No, but my body was telling me
Yeah.
to stop. I wasn't listening to it, and so I really didn't really get
So
diagnosed
what are those signs?
with
Because
that
I think it's really
autoimmune.
useful, because I'm 100% sure many entrepreneurs will be hearing these signals, or these signals will exist. What are those signals that you were getting but pushing through, just so that other people who might be listening, you think, that's the sort of thing that I might watch out for, because they could easily be facing the same issue that you are.
Well, as a young kid, well, not even as a young kid, maybe a young adult, I've noticed that, my hair would fall out a little bit more than the rest of my family.
Right.
But the doctors back then were like, no, it's fine. It's all good. It's all good. I also tended to need more sleep than other people.
Yeah.
And that all kind of came to conclusion that actually,
because you're not giving yourself that sleep, are you?
Correct.
Because you're pushing yourself so hard.
I was pushing myself way too hard, and I was prone to an autoimmune condition genetically. So it may actually not be relevant for everyone, but because I was under so much stress and sustained stress that I was not listening to myself when I actually needed the sleep.
Yeah.
I think it was the lack of sleep.
Yeah.
And the fact that my whenever I wake up, once the cortisone woke me up at like 4 or 5 a.m., it would just be about work.
I love that scientific explanation for the 5 a.m. horror. The cortisone,
it's just like, that's the first
cortisone.
thing that wakes you up, and the first thing I'm thinking about already is about work.
And is this the crying to sleep, and then the cortisone
Oh my gosh,
waking you up in the morning?
Sadly was that kind of like, no. Not every single night was that bad.
But it's like, it's, when you're in that tunnel, that dark tunnel, that I think unless an entrepreneur has been incredibly lucky, they will have, you can only really fully see it when you're out of it.
Exactly. And I think it's things like, you have to make your first fire. You have to fire your first employee. It's those kind of firsts that emotionally I connected with quite a lot. And because I didn't have an effective way to switch off my brain, I ended up in a whole month. I actually do remember this in November. I forgot which year now. But there was a whole month where there was a couple of different things happening at work, which just meant that I wouldn't actually get quality sleep for a whole month.
Yeah.
I'll go to bed and my mind is still ticking about work. And so therefore you only probably get, a couple of hours of light sleep. I'll wake up and then I'm already thinking about work, and then that just keeps going. And because I wasn't getting quality sleep, I think my problem solving skills and people skills and all of that, you just don't have the same capacity to act as a CEO when the team's looking for you to lead, especially at really tough times. And I ended up going through a spiral. And I don't think it was just that month, but that was a very clear month in my head just before Christmas and all of that. And then I think it was not long after was where I realized that actually I had like a redness on the top of my scalp.
Right.
If I had done something about it earlier on, I think it would have been diagnosed a lot quicker.
You've got to push yourself beyond the limit at this point.
I was just like, I'm too busy to even go to the doctor.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But then it started getting bigger and it was getting itchy and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
At the end of it, luckily, it's not a chronic disease condition, but it's not curable. So a lot of autoimmune, I just have to live with it. A lot of autoimmune conditions don't necessarily have a cure yet.
But they give you a huge variation in
correct.
how they're affecting you at any one time, and the choices you make and the pressures you're under, some of which is not your choice, that will have a huge impact.
Yeah, and I think it was only until I actually did check it out.
Yeah.
And then I actually remember I was back home at one point. Well, I'm dual citizenship, so I'm British and Australian.
Yeah.
I was back home that Christmas.
Yeah.
And then I was getting a normal checkup. It was like a normal checkup with my family. And then the GP went, your blood test results is a little bit...
So this doctor's a little bit more engaged than the one
yeah,
that was
my
telling you
own
not to worry about it years before.
Yeah, but that one was more just like, I feel like a lot
Yeah.
of my hair comes out, you
Yeah.
know, and I was
Well,
like
maybe
18.
there's more,
It was like,
more signs, I suppose, at that point.
it was signs that probably I had much more of
Yeah.
a prone to autoimmune condition, but I
Yeah.
wasn't showing any symptoms. But this time when I was in Australia, then my blood test results started to show, you know, some
Yeah.
trigger, and then that was when this started.
So does this feel like, because, you know, having an autoimmune condition, sort of self-evidently, is not a failure.
No.
But I know that sometimes when people have medical conditions, they feel like maybe their body's letting them down, but sometimes it almost does feel like a failure. And it shouldn't, but does it feel like, oh my God, my body's letting me down, did that feel like a failure? Or were you, which bit of it felt like a failure? Is it because this is stopping me from succeeding in other areas, or is it like the actual physical thing makes you feel like a failure yourself?
No, I think I felt that the autoimmune was a wake-up call
Right.
to how I was failing in life
Right.
outside of being a CEO.
Because
So
someone's
I've
gonna look
kind
at
of
you and
just
not
like,
see failure at all.
yeah, but it's just kind of like,
But that
hang on a
doesn't mean
second.
inside that you feel that way.
Just as if I was only pouring every
Yeah.
single waking moment to be an entrepreneur and be the CEO and a founder, I had lost identity and lost touch with everything else.
Yeah.
That was when it was a failure moment for me, was when I
Yeah.
was like, oh, well, there's no point trying to change the world if I'm not going to be alive. You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
if I'm not looking after myself, that was a
Yeah.
big failure for me.
Yeah.
To kind of go, oh, crap. And that was like imperative to a lot of other entrepreneurs that I know.
Yeah.
Some of them had heart attacks. Other people had other much more chronic health responses than mine. So I'm still very fortunate.
Yeah.
I think, but why I'm so
including
open
one of our
about
guests
it.
that we're going to be having the pleasure of speaking to in the future. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it is scarily more common than one might think.
Yeah, and I don't know how often people share that side of the story about the sacrifices or the health concerns and et cetera, but I realized that my body was trying to tell me to actually be a different type of CEO. So I think that where I actually learned from that was, in order to be a better CEO, I needed to look after myself.
Yeah.
And to be a better entrepreneur and to lead the team, I need to lead myself. I need to look after myself. And so I ended up having to really go through a whole journey of of self-discovery in a way,
Yeah.
but a self-discovery to live with the autoimmune while choosing a very stressful career path as an entrepreneur. And that's my choice, and my choice that I own to this day. But it was a lot of trial and error, right? Yeah. And I had to try various different things, like, you know, physically to get myself tired by playing sports or going to the gym and trying all different sorts so that I would just go to sleep. And then also prioritizing my diary. Yeah. And actually saying no to a lot of things. This is the first time, I think, in that period after I was diagnosed, when I went, oh, actually, instead of doing like 10 things over the weekend, even socially, instead of, I would used to meet like 2 or 3 friends over a Saturday. Yeah. Now it's like one thing.
You said, like, you know, there's no point being a successful CEO or solving a problem if I'm not alive. I mean, is that how you felt that it might end up if you carried on the way you were? That it might, you know, really seriously impact your health, not, you know, to progress beyond, you know, into something that might be seriously threatening your health.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was a very healthy wake-up call. Yeah. And that I needed to listen to my body, and that there was more to life than just being an entrepreneur. And there was other things that it might not have been a priority, but there are other aspects and identities that I didn't want to lose. So I also, another, I guess, second failure moment through the whole entrepreneurship is not so much, I'm not here necessarily talking about the startup failures, but I'm talking about the other life failures as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
That also actually coexists. So the second one happened when I actually started to feel like I was losing identity of myself.
Right.
I didn't actually know who Vivian Chan was outside of being the founder and CEO of Sparrow.
Yeah.
And that was very scary. But that only hit me after the autoimmune condition.
Well, sometimes these things come along twice, come along in twos.
Exactly. Because I think once I was diagnosed, then actually it was put under, I could actually have a bit of, keep the autoimmune in check. So it's all fine now. I do have a little bit of, you can tell in my scalp that, I might have an autoimmune, but it's not chronic, it's not systematic. So that part is great. So that's in check. And then after that, I'm like, whoa, well then what else do I want to achieve in life besides this identity? And I'm like, well, besides being that, Vivian Chan is also a daughter, is also a sister, And then I was like, have I been giving any time and space and headspace to any of these other identities that I should be playing, right?
Yeah.
And I guess, in a way, my family and my friends were very fortunate of giving me the space, and because I was in a different country. But I felt like I was neglecting the other roles, and therefore I went through a really interesting period where I felt like I lost myself. And that was and I talked to a lot of my entrepreneur friends then, and they were the only people who would really understand this.
I think it can act a little bit like an addiction sometimes I need to do this more and more, or maybe more accurately, a compulsion of like, if I'm not working on my business, which is the most important thing to me, I feel guilty if I'm doing anything else, and it just gets you into a cycle of spending more and more and more time, and probably with diminishing returns, because every extra hour you spend probably isn't delivering the benefits that you want it to, but it is taking away something else from your life. And I think it's a really interesting take on failure as one that's probably historically not one that people would admit to, because it's like, well, as long as my business is succeeding, then nothing else matters. And whereas actually I think it's a really important point to say, actually, as a business person, you can be failing even if your investors are lining up the cash, everything's growing, the awards are coming in. You can be failing if you're not happy and you're not fulfilled.
Yeah.
Because what does that stuff mean if you don't have that? And I think that's a really interesting definition of failure and a take on failure, which I think is always been around. But it's like, well, if my bottom line is doing well and my investors are happy and everything, then I'm killing it as a business person.
Yeah.
But are you really? If your health is is really suffering, and you're questioning, do I even know who I am anymore?
And I think that is something where you need to find yourself and you surround yourself with the right people in such challenging times. And it's fortunate now that I have amazing entrepreneur friends that helped me, support me through that. I also had great mentors, and to this day, I still have an amazing CEO coach called Kevin Ayers, who was one of the first people that Reed also hired and was the MD for LinkedIn Europe. But he really helped me grow from being a founder to a CEO.
Yeah.
And if you surround yourself with really good mentors, and also investors now, especially really, really experienced investors who have been entrepreneurs, and board members like Susan as well, they tell you to look after yourself.
Yeah, and I think that thing you said about, because I think it's something we will explore on the show, is founder and CEO often in that email sign-off go together, but they are very different roles and very different pressures, very different expectations.
Different expectations, very different roles. Also, emotionally, it comes with very different capacity. As a founder, you're very passionate about the mission. For me as well, I'm passionate about the people that I work with. But as a CEO, you often have to make really tough decisions where you do have to, the two sides do actually conflict. when you're like, as a CEO, I have to make these tough decisions and I have to, I don't know, let go of people in order to maximize X. But as a founder, you're like, but I don't want to do that, you know?
Yeah.
And then there's an additional role as a founder, is because you're the first exec, you're also the exec director. So that means you also have director duties to fulfill to shareholders, which is different to the CEO role, which is different to the founder role.
I always think of it in terms of, as the founder, you kind of own the dream, and as the CEO, you kind of own the machine. And those two things should be working in the same direction, and normally are, but there's a tension between them. You know, as you say, sometimes as the founder, my dream involves the family I started with. I want to keep everybody, and as the CEO who owns the machine, say, but that particular role isn't working anymore. And I get that. I think that's that can generate all kinds of feelings of failure and so. But you said like lost yourself, and it happened roughly around the same time, or in not too far in the aftermath of the autoimmune kind of discovery. Was there a particular moment where you said, I've lost myself, or is it a gradual realization? You know, you're in a coffee shop one day and just said, oh my God, do I even know who I am anymore? Or you meet up with a friend and they say something that triggers that. Was there a trigger to that?
That's a great question. I think it was gradual, but I do remember a key distinct moment where I was sitting at this is one of the co-working spaces previously where we're at, and this was, you know, a great space. There was a little bar area, and I had some of my other Cambridge friends come visit me in London. And I think I remember that distinct moment because Cambridge friends were entrepreneurs as well, but I think because it came from this the student days, I was able to be a lot more frank and open and transparent.
They know a different you.
Correct. Yeah. And I remember that distinct moment when one of my friends said, "So, are you happy?"
Yeah, killer question. So simple. Like a lot of the best questions, they're just so simple and so unexpected. It catches you off guard and then reveals so much truth.
Yeah. So I wasn't like, I could take off that, and a lot of entrepreneurs and CEOs know this. Take off that everything's amazing mask, and I went, whew, well, actually. And then I think I got really emotional. I didn't really understand why.
Yeah.
And then it started gradually coming to sense over a period of time about the whole identity thing.
Yeah.
I was also missing family.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is now probably 13 or 14 years.
Yeah.
Since I've actually moved from Australia. Yeah. I don't have family in the UK. I just have great friends.
As we've talked about, I spent 4 months in Australia, the reverse thing, 4 months in Australia.
Yeah, reverse.
And I know how I felt after 4 months. So I can only imagine how, you know, you felt. Because it's an amazing adventure, but just because something, a bit like entrepreneurship, just because something is an amazing adventure and you love it and you don't want to stop doing it, doesn't mean that there aren't really hard things about it you want to address. And I think that's probably one of the things that you as an entrepreneur and I as an entrepreneur and that people listening would be able to hopefully relate to is it doesn't mean you love it or care about it any less to accept that maybe it's not perfect. And I think so. It must working. Everything's working, and it's all great. And it's like, if I admit I'm really stressed or I have doubts, that in some way calls into question the commitment to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I think that's and sometimes, you know, it can come from great friends. It can come from anywhere. It can come from a colleague. But those moments are priceless because they're the moments that save you and stop you from, you know, we only have so many years on this planet, and you can so easily waste them without that moment of realization. And I hope that you know, we're not the only podcast that's doing it. It's just loads of people having those conversations out there. That's, I think, what we both want to really contribute to. Hopefully, not to have a whole life-changing moment out of this, but to share those moments from different people, and say that, hopefully, just improve people's understanding and get them to be maybe a bit easier on themselves.
being easier, I think, for any change to happen,
Yeah.
the first step is to be aware. And if you're not aware of it, then you can't acknowledge it, you can't process it, and you can't actually make any changes. So I think the aha or punch in the face or failure moments for me have always been the moments that I became aware of something. And the fact that I was aware, and to be fair, I guess at an earliest age. And I know that this is going to come in a couple of my other podcasts where I was really like envious of one of the guests going, oh, wow, you went through all of this life-changing moment at an earlier age. I wish I went through that, because I feel like that's not necessarily a gift, but I feel like it is a life-changing moment.
It's a bittersweet gift, but it is a gift.
It is a gift. And I feel like that's part of the really core life lessons that everyone has to go through.
Yeah.
And it's part of that self-discovery journey.
Yeah.
And the many awareness moments.
Yeah.
I've often found myself having to rely on my friends because I didn't have family.
Yeah.
And so my friends and my mentors were so crucial to the success that you see on all the bullet points here. It's not me.
Yeah.
It's definitely the team at Sparrow. And whether it's the highs and the lows that we go through together, but I want to also extend it to my peers, the entrepreneur network. If it wasn't for them, I definitely wouldn't be here.
But I think that's why we're doing a much more personal podcast and not just like top 10 tips for business success and what's happening in your industry. Because in days gone by, I think there was this strict demarcation between work, personal life, and that with the current generations, it's just not the same way. People expect their personal life and their work life to link up and be harmonious. I remember years ago, back when I was a lawyer, I had a supervising partner who has gone on to be a kind of team performance coach for like the Olympic team and the football team. So you're going to take an interesting path. Like my favorite lawyers are, people who sort of moved on, did other things, but he was just to say, like, you don't become a different person when you walk through the door to the office. Yeah. There are some people that can function like that, but if you're not like that, trying to maintain that is extremely bad
hard
for you.
Yeah, it shouldn't.
And like what you're saying, like you lose your sense of self and you lose your sense of you lose your health ultimately. That's why I think that this conversation that we're having about the personal side of business, it's not a separate one. It's part of your success, which is why we're sharing your personal story. And we're going to share other people's personal stories, not as just a pure human interest thing, but actually as a business podcast.
Yes, because if you try too hard to separate it, and also at the end of the day, you're one individual.
Yeah.
You wear many different hats and have different roles.
Yeah.
Some you choose, some you were born with, right?
Yeah.
But everyone has that individuality.
Yeah.
But what I've learned is in order for me to be a better version of myself and therefore also be a better CEO for the company, means that I need to know who I am. I need to know when I need to stop so that I can actually be more productive. And I need to know what actually I need in order to recharge myself.
Sometimes less is more.
Less is definitely
that
more.
old saying, but like sometimes less is more.
Yeah.
Not just in the fashion sense, but in the business sense.
Yeah, because I felt like, especially nowadays, I can definitely, a lot of it is through experience and a lot of it is through training as well. Great guidance, but I can get to answers and decisions and problem-solving skills much quicker.
I mean, you keep returning to that, like all these influences people have. Is that, your driving force in wanting to do this, to offer those stories and those support to other people? Because I've noticed that in every stage that we've talked about, you've referred back to those mentors, those entrepreneurial friends, that do I know who I am moment from a friend. That seems really, really important to you. And I'm guessing that's why doing this podcast is so is so important to you?
Yeah, I think because I was so far removed from my family.
Right. Yeah.
So it might have been a very different situation if I was closer to my family. But they were my family.
Yeah.
You know, they provided that emotional support that every entrepreneur needs, regardless of where you are in the journey. And I think I've also been trained at a younger age on persistence.
Yeah.
So I think being a scientist was a great curiosity, brought me great curiosity. Yeah. As a young kid, I actually was learning piano at the age of 6.
Yeah.
And I played every single day for 10 years consistently. So that was 1 hour a day at least, every single day until I was 16, and I got a diploma, which is past grade 8, in classical piano. And that was hard work. I had lots of failure moments. I also had a teacher who would be very proud in saying that I wouldn't go home unless I made one student cry a day. Yeah. And that was a very different kind of upbringing, but it drilled a little bit of persistence in me. Yeah. So it's interesting that, learning not to give up on failure moments, plus the curiosity, meant that I could actually be the entrepreneur that I am today. So therefore, it's not, all these successes that you see is not because that only happened since I started founding from Sparrow, right? It actually happened way before that. And it happened as my upbringing of Vivian Chan. So therefore, it has to be a whole package.
It takes
when
a long
you talk
time
about
to be an overnight success. You know?
Correct. It's never overnight success. Hardly ever is an overnight success.
And I guess that your journey has been to learn to balance that persistence and commitment and consistency and never give up mentality, I'll do it till I get it right, with your health and sense of identity. Because never give up is great, and it's obviously really important to successful entrepreneurship. But if you do never give up, and that means never getting the sleep you need, never taking time for yourself, it's like one of those things. It's great in the right dose, and that's a high dose as an entrepreneur. But you can overdose by just going way too far, And I think that's what you I think that seems to be the journey you've, that was your failure moment. Is I've not got that balance right, and everything feels like it's falling apart.
Yeah.
And then you go on to correct that. So what as of right now, is there anything, are there any sort of current failures that you're prepared to admit to, or is it quite plain sailing? Obviously it's never totally plain sailing, but just to bring us up to date in terms of your quote failure journey, is there anything that you want to share today, or is it all rainbows and sunbeams?
No, it's never rainbows. And
it's a strange metaphor. I don't know why I love that one.
But every day in an entrepreneurship's life is different. And it's really rare that it's always rainbows and sunshine and everything's great.
That's definitely my experience.
Lucky one.
Yeah.
It's actually maybe there's less of a half massive failure moment nowadays because I am a lot more experienced in it. Yeah. So it might just be that, okay.
You kind of know actually it isn't
quite failure. Exactly.
Part of it is the definition and how you see it.
It's a definition. You're right. I think you're right in the way that my definition of failure has changed over the years. Yeah. And so therefore it is an opportunity to solve problems.
That's why we use the quotation marks whenever we need any documentation to do with the show. It is quotation marks failure.
Yeah, because I think that the definition has evolved. Yeah. For me to fail, actually, if anything, means that I'm not getting enough sleep. It's a different kind of definition. And I actually feel like it's when I don't... I'm not happy as an individual because I haven't given enough time to my family, or I haven't given enough time to my partner, or I haven't given enough time to my team. It's not just one thing. It's sometimes it's the others that actually mean that I might be, oh, hang on a second. I'm failing here,
Yeah.
but that just means I need to adjust.
Yeah.
So my team knows this very, very well. I think that I'm very organized with my diary.
Yeah.
I also put in time when I need to do, etc. And I'm very good with work-life balance, and that's been hard worked. It's been a journey to get there, and it's a story that I have to get there in order for me to actually be a better entrepreneur.
Because I think that, again, it's that struggle to try and convince people that work-life balance doesn't mean taking it easy. It's effort to get the right work-life balance.
If anything, it takes more effort.
And I think the other thing that I really like about what you're saying is, because we talked about, scientists can be good entrepreneurs, is how people-centric all of your comments have been, and how great a counterpoint that is to this idea of this sort of cold calculating scientist who's just looking at the numbers. Because that's, I think that, the stereotype would be that you would come in here and say, oh, well, the revenue was down 2.2%, and this was my greatest failure was when
I can definitely do that.
We'll do that. But it's all of your stuff has been about people, how the team feels, how you feel, the value of fellow founders, of mentors and stuff. So that's, it's true. So, I think that's great.
Well, I guess at the end of the day, building a company is like building any relationship.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
So whether that is your individual team relationships, or it's external investor relationships, or sales clients relationship, ultimately you can be great at data, and the data will tell you.
Yeah.
But the people who are going to buy from you, whether it's a B2C or a B2B company, they're still people.
And a great friend of mine, the HR director at Chatham House, Lisa O'Daly, says every problem really at its core is a people problem.
Correct.
And every solution at its core is a people solution.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, well, I think that's a really good point to get to the subject of the show, the hopefully soon to be famous or infamous failure hypothesis. So we'll be asking all of our guests to comment on a simple hypothesis around how we deal with failure. So in the same spirit that you're sat in the hot seat, it only seems fair to put our hypothesis to you and get your reflections on that. And then we can, measure those against everyone else's. So I know you already know this, but our listeners won't have heard it before. So here's our simple and hopefully timeless hypothesis about failure. It is: our greatest failures are our most important experiments. Yet emotion often prevents us from examining and learning from these unexpected outcomes. There is constant pressure to celebrate success and hide failure. However, if we practice radical honesty and have the strength to be vulnerable, then we can turn our, quote, failures into the secret of our success and help others to do the same. So, Vivian, skeptic or believer?
An absolute believer.
I thought you might say that. It
Funny
gotta
that.
be strange, wouldn't it? I
The host is
absolutely
like, not sure.
fundamentally disagree with the failure hypothesis on this show.
That would make for a very interesting series.
It's good to defy convention sometimes. So, and I guess that we don't need to reflect too much on that, because I think it's self-evident from our discussion before why you would believe that.
Yeah, I definitely think that if I were to summarize it, the definition of failure is about vulnerability, but also self-discovery, especially on the very key aha moments. So it's being aware. I think failure is constant in our life. And you have to fail in order to actually understand and appreciate success. But the first step of that is to be aware.
Do you think that you are less scared by the word failure now than you would have been at, say, 18, 21, 25?
Yeah, I think it was always had a very bad connotation around it, right? It's like, oh, you failed, you got an F, whatever. But
hence
is
the
not,
show. Hence the show.
But F shouldn't necessarily be about failure. F in a way is like freedom for me.
There we go. The F word, failure, freedom. Love it. Okay, well, thanks for being so honest and open, and we're going to hear lots of other people being open and honest, and we're excited to do that. But in each case, with everybody, once we've kind of talked about the tough times, we want to end on a positive note. So we've talked a lot about the past and the road that led you here. So what does the future hold for Vivian Chan? What are you working on at the moment? What are you excited about?
Well, obviously, for one, this podcast.
Good answer. That's the answer I was looking for.
This is one of the first new things about Vivian Chan that you will get to hear and see
Exactly.
Firsthand, right? Actually, being very intimate. Hopefully, hearing this in your headphones as a podcast to actually understand whether it's entrepreneur to entrepreneur or business leaders to entrepreneur, that
or people that may one day be that entrepreneur. There could be a Vivian Chan listening to this
in the making. I'm sure. I really hope there's plenty. There's plenty.
Yeah, especially if they're a scientist as well. Well, non-scientists also welcome, but I love the idea of encouraging other people to go down that path that you went down.
Yeah, and I think so. This is really exciting for me because it's also me being open and transparent about sharing my other parts of myself to the much wider public.
Yeah.
But also Sparrow is really taking off, especially after the pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, I do have early investors and mentors who've always said I was a bit of a visionary, and that I had investors turn around 180 degrees after the pandemic hit, and they're like, "Oh, now I understand why I need to understand 3-minute digests of science." You know.
Yeah. Like I say, it's such being able to give people that really dense technical information in the bite size, make it accessible is invaluable.
Absolutely. So now that Sparrow, we're trying to make science accessible.
Yeah.
And accessibility for us means understandability. And given that there's like millions and millions of scientific research, all the governments and private institutions pour billions of dollars into scientific research. Everything we live and breathe is based on science in terms of air and gravity, hormones, everything.
Yeah.
However, only 3% of the population can actually access and understand the latest of cutting-edge research.
Well, that sounds like a really exciting challenge to take on, and I'm sure everything you've talked about today will help you meet that challenge. I think it's a really good point to end on, so all that remains is for me to say thanks so much, Vivian, for sitting in the hot seat today and for sharing your failure story. At Maledro, we are really looking forward to the rest of the season.
Thank you. I really enjoyed being able to visit those moments, and I'm really looking forward to interviewing our first guest on the next episode. Scott Mackin, who is the managing partner of Denham Capital, a global private equity firm that specializes in sustainable energy. He works in one of the industries most critical to the future of our planet. You've been listening to The Failure Hypothesis with me, Vivian Chan. To hear other inspiring stories from unique leaders, please subscribe to The Failure Hypothesis on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you for listening to The Failure Hypothesis, a Maledro digital production. To find out more about making and appearing in business content with interest, visit our website at maledrodigital.com.